The auction block was not made of wood, but of a cold, polished gray alloy that seemed to swallow the light. It stood in the center of the sprawling derelict bazaar, a place where the rules of the galactic concord were conspicuously absent. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, strange spices, and the underlying musk of countless species. Crowds of various forms milled about, their clicking, grumbling, and hooting voices creating a dissonant symphony of commerce among the chained and caged offerings rare beasts, crystalline data forms. Contraband Tech 1 lot drew a quieter, more discerning crowd. She was small, even for her species, a humanoid form with skin the pale silver of a moonlit stream and large, luminous eyes that held the deep violet of a nebula. Delicate, fin-like ears trembled against the sides of her head. Currently, those eyes were wide, with a terror so profound it silenced the usual murmur of barter around her platform. She was bound not with simple shackles, but with a cruel, energized harness that forced her into a low, uncomfortable crouch, her wrists secured to her ankles. A handler, a hulking brawl with pebbled green hide, stood nearby, a shock rod held loosely in his grip. The auctioneer, a thin, multi-limbed Teshan, began his spiel, his voice amplified and translated through hovering drones. Lot 47, a prime specimen juvenile female of the luminar species. Intact neural sensitivity, ideal for empathetic servo rolls or private collection. Note the epidermal luminescence. A living heart piece. Bidding starts at 500 galactic standard. The human had not come to the derelict bazaar for a slave. He had come for engine parts, the kind that didn't leave a registration trail. His ship, the Greyhound, was old but honest, and he preferred to keep its journeys quiet. He was a broad man, his face weathered by hard light and harder choices, his eyes a calm, observant gray. He moved through the crowd with the deliberate ease of someone who knew how to avoid trouble. The commotion at the central block was a distraction he intended to ignore, until a fragmented, desperate plea brushed directly against his mind. It was not a sound. It was a cold, sharp feeling of frost and despair, carrying a single, coherent message. Please. He stopped, turning against his better judgment. His gaze found the source on the platform. The Luminar girl was staring directly at him, her eyes pools of silent, screaming agony. The mental touch came again, sharper, clearer this time, bypassing his ears and settling like ice in his skull. They break the quiet inside. They make it loud and sharp and wrong. Please, human, purchase me and save me from them. The handler tapped the shock rod against his palm, a clear, threatening gesture. The human felt a slow heat rise in his chest. He had seen injustice before. The galaxy was paved with it. But this direct psychic cry for help, this raw terror from a child bound like an animal, cut through his practiced cynicism. The Teshan auctioneer was already taking bids, the numbers climbing as collectors assessed the rarity. 600 from the glove merchant. Do I see 650? 650 from the collector in the rear. The human calculated rapidly. His engine fund. The risk. The undeniable, life-altering trouble this would bring. He thought of his quiet ship, his solitary routes. Then he looked at the girl, saw her flinch as the brawl handler shifted his weight. The decision crystallized, cold and hard. 1,000, the human said, his voice cutting through the hum of the crowd. It was not a shout, but it carried. A ripple went through the attendees. The Teshan's limbs fluttered with delight. A bold opening raise. 1,000 standard from the human. Do I hear 11? The glove merchant, a being of bulbous eyes and twitching mouthparts, shittered angrily. 1,100. 15, the human replied, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. He met the glove's gaze steadily until the merchant looked away, muttering, The auctioneer was ecstatic. 15. A profound value placed on quality. Going once. The collector in the rear, a shrouded figure, gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. 16 from the private patron. A contest of wills. The human's jaw tightened. He was nearing his limit. He thought of the parts he needed, then of the psychic scream of wrong. 2,000, he stated, pouring every credit of his parts budget and a significant chunk of his reserves into the number. Silence fell. The shrouded collector did not move. The Teshan waited, his limbs drooping slightly in disappointment at the ceased competition. Sold to the human for 2,000 standard. The transaction was swift and impersonal. Credits were transferred. The brawl handler deactivated the harness with a contemptuous flick, and the human stepped forward. He removed his own warm thermal weave jacket and gently draped it over the girl's trembling shoulders. He did not grab her arm, but simply gestured toward the path leading out of the bazaar. "Come on," he said, his voice low. "Let's go." She followed, a silent silver shadow at his side, her small hand finally reaching out to clutch a fold of his shirt. The mental noise had softened into a thrum of shock and fragile, tentative hope. The walk back to the Greyhound was tense. The human expected a challenge, a renege, an ambush. None came. Only the hostile, jealous stares of those who had lost their prize. He ushered her up the ramp, sealed the ship, and initiated a pre-flight sequence with practiced speed. Only when the hum of the engines filled the cabin, and the derelict bazaar fell away into the star-dusted black, did he finally turn to her. She had curled into the co-pilot's chair, his jacket engulfing her, watching him with those enormous, ancient eyes. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, a small motion. Her voice, when it came, was a soft, melodic whisper, unlike the psychic cry. It was the first sound from her mouth he had heard. The harness. It was for control, not for injury. They wanted the product undamaged. The word product tasted bitter in the air. "You spoke in my mind," he said. "We? My people, we feel the quiet spaces in others. The thoughts not shaped by words. Yours felt. Solid. Like a stone in a river. Not sharp. Not broken." She looked down at her hands. The others who bid. Their quiet spaces were jagged, hungry. They wanted to own the quiet, to break it and hear it sing for them. The human leaned back in his chair, studying the star chart. "Where is home?" The question made her flinch. "It is gone. Our world, our system. It was harvested by the Cathar. They are the whisperers in the dark. They come for our kind. The ones in the bazaar, they were just scavengers who found a lost piece." A tear, shimmering with faint light, traced down her cheek. "I have no home." He was silent for a long time, navigating the ship onto a quiet course, away from major lanes. "I have a home," he said finally. "It's this ship. It's not much. And it's not safe, not anymore, if they decide to come looking. But it's a place, and no one here is owned." She looked at him, the fear slowly receding, replaced by a profound, weary confusion. "You spent your resources. You took danger. For nothing. You do not want my song? You do not want to touch the quiet?" The human allowed a small, grim smile to touch his lips. "Kid, the last thing I want is for someone to poke around in my quiet. It's a mess in there, and I didn't do it for nothing." He paused, choosing his words with care. "I did it because you asked, and because you were bound. And no one, nothing, should ever be bound like that." He prepared a ration pack for her, showed her the small spare cabin she could use, and gave her the access code for the door. "It locks from the inside," he explained. "Only you." She stood in the doorway, clutching the packaged food, the jacket still around her. The psychic presence he now felt was a soft, warm hum like sunlight on metal. It was gratitude, and it was awe, and underneath, the first fragile strands of trust. Days turned into weeks. The Greyhound moved from fringe port to fringe port, never staying long. The human, whose name was Leo, taught her the basics of the ship. She learned quickly, her delicate hands surprisingly adept at fine system checks. She called him the human at first, then, hesitantly, Leo, he called her kid. She learned of humanity not from him, but from the ship's archived data histories of a species both brutal and kind, capable of profound evil and staggering compassion. A species that had fought its way out of its own darkness to a place among the stars, still flawed, still struggling. She saw their art, their music, their stories of heroes and monsters. She began to understand the stone in the river, that one evening. As they drifted in a quiet sector, she sat in the co-pilot's chair, watching the nebulae paint the viewport in pastel hues. "Your people have a word," she said softly. "Humane. It means to show compassion, to act with kindness." Leo, cleaning a power coupler, grunted in acknowledgement. "It is a strange word," she continued, "to have a word for your own kindness. My people, we just call it being. But for you, it is a choice, an action you must take, again and again." She turned her luminous eyes to him. "You chose it. In that terrible place, you chose humane." He put the coupler down. "It wasn't a grand choice, kid. It was just the right thing to do." "That," she said, the psychic warmth flooding the cabin, a sense of flowers blooming in a sterile room, "is what makes it grand." They did not speak of the future. They were two lost things, a human and a luminar on an old ship. There were still dangers. The Kayahar were out there. Scavengers might remember. But for now, the ship was warm and quiet and free. And in that quiet, for the first time since her world ended, the girl began, very softly, to hum.